So hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar, What to Know About Service as an Elected Director or Officer of HFES. All attendees are in listen-only mode. However, we'll be happy to take questions at the end and we can unmute those who the moderator calls on, or attendees can use the Q&A feature in their toolbar. Today's moderator is Ellen Bass, and Ellen is the Interim Senior Associate Dean for Research and Professor of Information Science at Drexel University in Philadelphia. Ellen currently serves HFES as Secretary Treasurer-elect and Chair of the HFES Nominations and Elections Committee. So election season is almost on us and we have a lot to cover today. So Ellen, I'll turn it over to you.
Terrific. So I think you'll be excited by today's webinar because you'll have the opportunity to hear from many of our very senior, current and previously elected officers, and you'll have the opportunity to hear their stories as well as to ask your questions. Steve, could you put up the, I had sent you like a couple of slides. Just to let you know, so I am currently the Secretary Treasurer-elect. The way that office works, as well as the President, you're the elect, you're it, and then you're passed. And so just to give you a tiny flavor of some of the other elected positions that I've had, I've been on the EC, which is what we call the Executive Council. So if you hear us say EC, that's what that stands for. And then those of you who have been active in CEDM, I had a lot of positions in that TG. And then when I was a student, I was president and vice president of the Georgia Tech student chapter. I wanted to just briefly go over how the election cycle works. And I should point out that, could you just go back one slide? That we do have in the bottom right corner, and you're not meant to read it, but we do have an org chart up on our HFES website. And some positions are appointed and some positions are elected. And so I wanted to make sure that that distinction was made. All right, could we go to the next slide, please? So the reason we wanted to have the webinar now is that in May, we're going to have a call for nominations. And according to our operating rules, we have to have the call at least 5 months before the annual meeting. Nominations are open for a month, and then the people who have been nominated have the opportunity to confirm that they actually want to run. And that's part of my role. And then we have to get the ballots together for the membership. So the people who are going to run will need to provide their biographical information. The voting will start on January 25th. It's open for a month. We give the candidates then the feedback before we announce it to the rest of the society. But the new positions don't start until we have our annual meeting. We have an executive council meeting for 2 days before the annual meeting. On the first day, the people who are finishing their terms are active, and then the following day, the new officers take part, and so you'll hear about that. And so Kermit is wants to chime in. Go ahead, Kermit.
No, I just think you should tell them about the nomination process, that it's not about a single nomination, but you need to get nominated by multiple people, and the top 3 for each position make it to the ballot.
That's right. And so, well, maybe we'll jump right in. So Caroline Kao couldn't be with us today, but she wanted to be part of the webinar, and she has provided a video and actually touches on this idea about being able to get a lot of nominations. So let me turn it over to her video.
So my name is Caroline Kao. As of this recording, I am the immediate past Secretary Treasurer of HFES. I have served in several other elected and non-elected volunteer positions in the Society, such as Program Chair and Technical Program Chair of the Healthcare TG, of the COTG, the Human Factors Prize Judging Panel, the Chapanis Best Student Paper Prize, and the Fellow Selection Committee. As a grad student, I was president of the student chapter at the University of Toronto. Running for elected office, and especially for a position on the Executive Council, is rather different process than volunteering for committee work. You have to get enough nominations, including self-nomination, to get on the ballot. Now, I didn't know that the first time I thought about running. I nominated myself and I asked 2 of my colleagues to nominate me. And I was surprised that I didn't get on the ballot. So the following year, I asked more friends and colleagues to nominate me and got on the ballot. So what was my motivation for running for office? Mostly, I feel a sense of duty to serve my primary professional family and contribute to the society. And also because I wanted to serve in new ways and learn about how HFES works at the governance level. And finally, and this is a selfish reason, I wanted to spend time with people I like, working on projects that are not part of my professor researcher job, but that had an impact on my profession. To be sure, there is a time commitment required, which is expected if you want to do something well. What I get out of this time commitment is a great deal more than I put in. I gain a sense of fulfillment knowing that I'm serving our membership. I learn new skills such as collaborative decision-making, respect for different opinions and priorities, and due to good timing, dubiously good, I guess, I also learned about budget and finance and crisis management during a pandemic. I also learned a lot about myself in terms of my strengths and weaknesses as a leader. And most important for me, I gained some visibility, which has helped me with my personal passion, mentoring. The visibility meant that more students and junior professionals in the society have reached out to me than ever before. So I hope you will also consider serving HFES by running for office. You'll find that what you gain is more than what you put in, as I have.
Well, thank you, Caroline. I do want to add that, so I am the elect Secretary Treasurer, and so Caroline is, part of that 3-year cycle, and she has provided wonderful feedback for me, and I wanted to mention that in my remarks as well, that it's a very collaborative society. People want the officers to be successful, and the past officers are a wonderful resource. I'd like to turn it over to Rich Holden, who has been serving on the EC. And Rich, please introduce yourself, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ellen. Hey, everyone. So I'm an associate professor in a School of Medicine at Indiana University. And I took on the elected role of Executive Council member at large, I think in 2017. So my service ended in 2020. I'm no longer on the council. And so I can kind of speak from the perspective of somebody who's been there and would definitely do it again when time allows and the opportunity presents itself. We were just chatting before this kicked off, and actually, Steve, I don't know if you can pull up the slide that I had while I'm talking. No rush. and, you know, each of us kind of talked about how do we get into executive council, and would we have known about it if we hadn't had an event occur. In my case, the event was Kermit Davis, who at the time was running for president and was the president-elect the same year that I joined the council, coming to me and saying, hey, you should consider running for executive council. And I hadn't thought about that. I didn't know what it took. So it was kind of a one-on-one interaction that really got me going. And that's obviously not scalable, right? And it's not sustainable. We can't expect Kermit to keep that role. Obviously, others have done the same for various members in the past, but we're hoping that it just becomes a little bit more transparent what the process is. And people can come to, you know, current leaders, current elected officials, past elected officials, and ask without having to wait for that kind of serendipitous encounter with Kermit. I think that this picture is a good one because if you haven't seen it before, I'll tell you that this is the first meeting of the Human Factors Society, which was the original name of HFES. Happened in 1957, and there were 100 people at the meeting, and all men, all white men, except for one woman, if you can see her kind of towards the left in the middle row, kind of behind that goofy-looking gentleman. So that peeking out is Dr. Cameron, who was the only woman present at the meeting in 1957 of the Human Factors Society in a hotel in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And in many ways, after Kermit kind of let me know about what executive council was and could be, this picture was the reason I decided to run for election. I ran on 3 major goals, and they were goals that I wanted to represent among society membership in general, but they were also very strongly personal goals. The first was increasing membership because I knew we were a relatively small society compared to others, and I wanted to just grow our numbers. You know, obviously we were bigger than 100, but we hadn't grown that much if you think about, you know, the 50 plus years that had passed. And then secondly, I wanted to increase diversity, especially internally in our membership. I was a little bit concerned that the demography of the society hadn't changed all that much, really. In the past 50 years, there were still a lot of males, still a lot of white males, and still a lot of people who were connected to military and really science oriented, or, you know, faculty oriented. Now, even though I was at the time a professor, just like I still am, but I realized that the society would be better off if we embraced our practitioner members and offered them opportunities, as well as to other underrepresented minorities, women, people of color, and so forth. And then my third goal was to organize HFES as a society in order to promote our discipline of human factors. I thought that we needed not only to demonstrate our discipline's impact, but also scale and increase our impact in societal importance, or areas of societal importance like health or environment. And so to just recap, I was at the precipice of an election, thinking if I were elected, I would work with others to transform, you know, this kind of historical image of 100 people in a room to many thousands more, and then really beyond the room, with a much more diverse demography as well. And then I can talk later if questions arise about all the things that I was involved in as an executive council member, but they included making the difficult decision to move our headquarters out of a small office in Santa Monica to an East Coast based, management company that now runs our office. Obviously COVID, obviously the reckoning that we had with systemic racism over the past year, and you know, a lot of other things that I was very proud of being part of. The way I would end my kind of introduction is to say that I thought that I was going to come on to council and kind of be working on my own initiatives, trying to figure out like, what can I do? And I found out that that was the wrong pronoun. It wasn't I, it was we. And I had the pleasure of working with really talented, really, you know, lovely people, not only developing relationships with them, but also learning how to work together with really a committee of people to make really big changes. Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. And I think Rich brings up many good points, and I wanted to highlight two of them, which is that Executive Council is the group that helps ensure that the society is not only running now but is also running in the future. And the other part, I think Rich really touched on really well, is that we get the opportunity to do initiatives. Sometimes the initiatives are ones that we start. Sometimes we are encouraged to work with our colleagues. And just as a small example, the year that I joined Executive Council, I was really interested in helping some of the mid-career members of our society, because we had done a lot of initiatives for students and early career, and had the opportunity to kick off a task force, which is I now am no longer leading, and it's still vibrant. And so you have that opportunity as part of the Executive Council. I'd like to turn it over to Carolyn, who's also done so much for our society and is another one of my mentors. So with no further ado, let me turn it over.
Thanks very much, Ellen. I think we're mutual mentors to each other. I want to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to participate in this, and really that means thank you for all the different opportunities that I've had to serve in various positions in HFES over the years. I have been a member of HFES since I was in grad school, and I always consider it my professional home. And I have been given opportunities and looked for opportunities to be involved since I was in grad school. I have a number of things listed on this page. It's not about bragging, it's about giving you ideas about various ways that you could get involved. I don't even have the various committees and task forces that I've just been member of over the years, or my TG membership. I don't have that mentioned on here either. So many ways to get involved in HFES, and I encourage you to do so. As you've heard other people talk about today, the value to you, the increase in your networking, the friends that you'll make, it's really kind of, you might not be able to imagine how great service. It's great that you provide that service, but the rewards that you get back are equally as great. We were asked to talk about a few different points here. So the first one was what motivated you to run for office. And as Carolyn Kao had said, the desire to serve and contribute, and as Rich talked about, that I think drives a lot of us. But you've also heard consistently that encouragement from others has been important to get people to put their hat in the ring, so to speak. And so I really want everybody who's listening to this webinar not just to consider running for office, but who do you know that, you could nudge, that you think would really be an important contributor, has a lot of good ideas, but just needs some of that outside encouragement to consider running. I know that for me, that was what motivated me to, or encouraged me to put my hat in the ring for running for the EC, for member at large, and also secretary treasurer, was conversations that I had with other people in HFES who, expressed their belief in me. I was fortunate enough a few weeks ago to talk with Betty Sanders, who was the first and our only Black female president of HFES, and she expressed the wonderful encouragement that she got from Barry Beath when, after the first time she ran for president, she was not elected. And Barry said, get back in there, try again. And she did, and she was elected to that office. And the society was much the better for her having served in that office. So, please encourage, and as people were saying, Kermit can't do it all. So it's up to all of us to recognize people that we know that we could encourage to run for office. Next, what did the experience mean to you personally? Well, being encouraged to run is really encouraging. That really helps you when you can see other people believe in you. And so that's kind of a nice boost. Also, of course, the experience of being in office is really rewarding when you see that you're able to influence the direction and the decisions that are made on behalf of the members and also on behalf of the society. As we talked about here a moment ago, we're obviously very concerned about providing services and making membership, providing value for members, but we also have to make sure that the society exists into the future. And so the fiduciary responsibility of EC members is really important as well. And need to recognize that. What new skills did you learn? What other takeaways were there for you? Certainly my ability to collaborate improved, as was mentioned before. It's very collaborative working on the EC and really any office that you hold within HFES. A key takeaway, and a couple people have touched on this already, you need to be prepared. You don't really know what you're going to be walking into in terms of things going on in the world. 9/11 happened in September, like right before our annual meeting. Well, there goes your annual meeting, and now you're in a budget crisis. Or you have a pandemic and you can't have your annual meeting and you're in a budget crisis. So you don't know when, circumstances are going to really require that the EC steps up and takes firm action, but also that requires a lot of thought and consideration too. So I don't mean this to discourage anybody from running. I'm just saying that there is real responsibility here, and you need to, go into this with your eyes open about what the time commitment might be, what you may have to be dealing with. Do you feel like your efforts have benefited the members in the society? Yes, I really do. We've made some really important decisions when I was on EC for that period of 3 years in the secretary treasurer position and the elect and the actual and the immediate past. That was the period of transition when we were deciding where we were going to go with our management of the society, because Lynn, our executive director forever, had decided to retire. So there was many important decisions to be made at that point in time. We also were recognizing the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that we did not have any strategic goals that addressed that explicitly. And so that was one of the important things that occurred while I was on EC, is that we formalized the recognition of the importance of that, and really put time and effort, which has continued since that point in time. What time commitment? Yeah, as I was saying, in some ways it's difficult to predict. The EC now meets monthly, so that's kind of your minimum baseline. But beyond that, there could be more. There could be, quite a bit more. So that is a little bit difficult to estimate. And we'll leave it at that. But don't hesitate. If you've got questions today, that's great. If something comes up later that you're wondering about, you can reach out to certainly any of us and be happy to address your questions.
Thank you. That was fantastic. There's been a few questions that have come through. Let me just, I want to make clear that in order to be nominated for the ballot, we generally get dozens and dozens of nominations for each person. So do reach out to your network if you're interested in order to get those nominations. You might see emails coming across your TG listservs from other people. That's why they're doing it, because, not through the TGs? All right, has to be.
You can't use listservs as a mechanism to do it. You have to do your own emails.
When I see 3 heads shaking vigorously no, I think I said something that was incorrect. So yes, so do it through your own emails. As I say, everybody else is everybody else's mentor, and so we don't let anybody make any mistakes. So it's a really very warm environment. There was a question about whether or not the elections have been highly contested, or whether we've been getting a lot of nominations. So we have been getting a lot of nominations, but as we've mentioned, we want to make sure that the process is transparent, that people aren't being not part of the process because they just don't have the information, or they have inaccurate information, or that Kermit just didn't have a chance to reach out personally. So, we really are trying to do in basketball what we would call a full court press, being that we just finished up the basketball season for colleges, in order to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be considered. At the end, after the rest of our panelists have spoken, Steve's also going to talk about some of the requirements and some of the resources that are available for members of the EC. But I would like to turn it over. We have 2 more panelists. Both have served as president of the society. So I'm honored to now turn it over to Nancy Cook to talk about her perspectives of serving for the society.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen. And I feel like I'm going to be repeating most of the things that people have already said. Steve, can you show the black and white photo? Yes, that one. So I'm Nancy Cook. I'm a professor of human systems engineering at Arizona State University, and I was on the EC from 2007 to 2013 and served as president-elect, president, and past president from 2015 to 2018. And as many people have said, I was motivated along the way by very many people. One of them was one of my mentors, Bill Howell, who's seen here in the center in between Lynn Struther and Lynn Struther on the left and Betty Sanders on the right. Yeah, he pushed me to get involved in many things. One of the things was being the editor. He was, of course, editor before me of the journal. I was involved in some other things too, such as CEDM program chair. But I like this picture in particular because it kind of brings home some of the things that I dealt with in my time at EC. So Bill Howell was really much against the accreditation process that we had at the time. And so I was motivated when I went into the EC to sort of take that on. And then to his left, Lynn Struthers, this was a funny story. I was elected president, and as soon as I was to start my presidential year, I get a call from Andy Amata and Bill Maris and Lynn announcing that Lynn is retiring. And that, so all of a sudden I had a full agenda ahead of me, and that's when we started the transition. But the funny thing is, I never, yes, and HFES is my professional home. I've been in it since graduate school, but I never saw myself as a leader or in any kind of leadership position. I didn't think that being on a board or an executive council sounded like a fun thing to do. I didn't really know much about it. I kind of heard that it's like smoke-filled rooms with men making all the decisions, and like that doesn't sound very fun either. And if it weren't for people like Bill Howell pushing me along the way, I think I probably would have just avoided it. As editor, I was invited to sit in on an EC meeting as a guest because they were talking about editorial issues at the time. And that was really, really eye-opening. I found out that it's not just a smoke-filled room, and these people are actually really fun and friendly and great people. And I thought, well, this may not be so bad. And I know that they were interested in the accreditation issue too. So soon enough, I decided to run for executive council member of large, and was, and that started me off on the executive council. And I was able to then chair a task force on accreditation, which managed to change the accreditation process in a way that I think Bill Howe would have approved of. So that was kind of rewarding for me. And so you can move to the next photo, Steve. So in 2017, I dealt with Lynn Struthers' retirement and put together many functions, including this retirement party at the Austin meeting in 2017. And this was like a big deal in my presidential year. Not only were we dealing with transition, but I wanted to send Lynn off in a very big way. And so we had a number of activities, and I joked with Lynn that she was Bridezilla and I was a wedding planner. So I would say that one of the skills that I learned in my year as president was wedding planning skills. Also fun things like boardroom bingo. So the council isn't just stuffy old men sitting around smoking cigars. It's people doing fun things like playing boardroom bingo and getting to know each other really well. And I've developed a lot of close friendships through the EC, and I don't want to underestimate the importance of friendships and fun and collegiality. I think that was a big part of my time on the EC. And you see all these smiling faces. That these are all people who've been involved in the past, most of them in EC or presidential roles. So I've done, during my year as president, not only did I deal with the transition and the retirement of Lynn, but I also took up a couple of other causes, including expanding, well, making a new strategic plan and expanding the sort of the problem areas of our society to meet some of the grand challenges of the NAE. And the one thing that I'm not sure we've talked about a lot is time commitment. And I have to say that a lot of times EC members will complain that people are just getting to the meeting and you feel like you've been there already for a week. It's only really 2 days, but it does lengthen the time of the annual meeting, and then there's a mid-year meeting as well. But I really started enjoying those meetings almost more than the annual meeting itself. So, and the time to prepare for the meeting is not too bad. You can read the reports probably on the plane heading to Austin or wherever. But I would have to say that I think it is what you put into it, and you get out more than you put in. And so the more time that you devote to this, the more rewarding it can be. So taking on extra committee work and task forces can be super rewarding. And I really feel like HFES is my family now because I know so many people so well. And most of it's through the kind of EC activities and president activities. I can't say enough about how important it was and how wrong I was about wanting to avoid leadership and smoky boardrooms and how I thought it was so boring. It was anything but. And so I would definitely recommend taking a chance. And I think one of the messages that's coming across here is that the senior leadership in the society need to really nudge people as much as possible because that was so important for all of us. So with that, I'll turn it back to Ellen.
Thank you, Nancy. That was wonderful. I want to make sure to highlight a couple of points I think that Nancy made. There is this notion among several of us that I'm not sure if it's reluctant leaders or hidden leaders, or we didn't realize we were leading. So many of us, started out as graduate students. Perhaps we reviewed for the conference or we reviewed for the journal. Maybe we were on a research side. We were on the editorial board or in Nancy's case, even the editor-in-chief. And we viewed that as our contributions. And then over time, through exposure, we realized that there are these other opportunities, whether it's as secretary treasurer to understand the budgeting side and how, where the money goes and making strategic decisions about investing, or whether it's coming up with a vision for the society or coming up with a strategic plan. And I think what you're hearing from a lot of us is we're just very passionate about the society being successful. And when you come to us and say, well, you're the society leaders, we're like, oh, not us, but we are. And actually many people in the society are leading different initiatives. And what we're really saying here, well, think about giving back to the society in a newer, a different way. And if you do that, you'll actually grow and learn a lot of skills. I'm an academic leader, and some of the skills that I learned through HFES, I'm actually getting to apply in my academic setting. And I hadn't really made the connection between those. And I will say, I did not purposely introduce any of the folks because as it came up in some of the Q&A questions, people are asking, what kind of positions prepare you to be on the EC? And we've all had different paths to getting to the EC, but in some cases, some of it is learning on the job. We are told what to do. I've never run an election before, and here I am responsible for our elections this year. We have a wonderful group of people to help you with that support. So I don't want people to feel like there has to be, you had to have been a TG chair before you can be there isn't like a set path. But I'll turn it over to Kermit, who had sent me his bio, and it was so long that it would have taken the entire hour. So I'll let you pick and choose, Kermit, which parts of your background you like to highlight. And then
I think I'll address some of the questions a little bit into here. Steve, can you share my slide? So there are many pathways to get to EC, and there's many things that you can do to get involved. And certainly the more involved, the more you're going to be broader recognized to get elected. So part of it is being involved to get elected. But there are other people that are in the room with the EC, and that starts with the division chairs. I was one of the inaugural people that started as a division chair. Back then it was domain leaders. Then they got changed to division chairs. And so these are the individuals that are at the table but don't get the vote. And they get to lead the various divisions and really run a lot of the initiatives that the EC come up with and drive it down to the committees and communicate to the committees. Looking at sort of where you want to start in, I think that's certainly one level. And I think, the other two is really at-large members and secretary treasurer. At-large ones come to the table. They do vote future issues. They provide perspectives, discussions, and even division chairs do. They really just don't get to vote on any initiatives. They get to provide input throughout the meetings. And then secretary treasurer is really a high-end at-large member because they do run the elections. They review the budget. They don't go and have to go and develop the budgets or anything like that. Steve does that. The Smith Buckland does that. They just have to look over it and be a constant editor, reviewing the budgets and making sure that we're making the right decisions, making the right recommendations to the council. And there's a whole committee to help you on those, to evaluate both the budget and the election cycle. So for each of these positions, and including the president, it's a 3-year term. You come in as a elect, then you go as the individual that's running it, and then you go as past. So it's a 3-year commitment for each one of them. I do believe the president is one that needs to be, you should be on EC before. I just would strongly advocate that because it's really difficult to come in and try to push initiatives and that there should be some involvement that you understand how EC works. So people do come in and not have that experience, but I do think that it's better to have that avenue going through at large members or secretary treasurer and sitting at the table and seeing how EC works. And you have a much better idea of what's been done and what's being done, and then you can help develop your vision on it. I have 2 other pictures here. One of the things that I've done in the past has been on the conference host committee, where I was lucky to be involved in that at a time. Oftentimes you get upgrades in hotel rooms. You don't get paid for the hotel rooms. You still end up paying that, but you get upgrades in that. So there's some perks there that you do get involved. There is meetings before each the mid-year meeting that's usually tied to the healthcare symposium the weekend before, as well as the annual meeting. And then there's monthly meetings typically that are hour long that kind of touch base to the workings throughout the year that are being driven towards that. And really it's about learning what the committees are doing and trying to develop a strategy for moving forward. We've become very, over the years since when I became a division chair to becoming president, we really went through a change in how we dealt with it. When we first started, when the division chairs were put in place, the EC was very tactic oriented. They went and tried to handle everything and not really look at the strategic in the future. And now it's all about strategic discussions and even sitting around the table, you get sort of, you get the weed comment when people get down into the weeds that we should be talking about the strategy and moving. Is this a strategic discussion that's going to impact? Because you're only there a certain number of hours to really make impact. The 3 years that you're on EC for any of these positions goes really fast. But certainly you have, some of the great things. I obviously have the same picture that Nancy just put up here, the camaraderie that you have and the people I've learned from and mentored. I had my mentors that pushed me to become a division chair, pushed me to move up through each of these positions, as well as being recruited on all types of committees that I've been recruited on. I think the common denominator with all of us is that, most of us have picked Human Factors Ergonomics Society as our lead home, and that this is the place we want our profession to be, and that we want to make sure it's here for future. And that's one of the driving factors in it. And I go back to my presidential speech that, don't be a zombie, get involved, go out there and it can be at a committee level, it can be at the executive council level, it can be a division chair. It doesn't have to be jump right into the executive council level. And then my final note is, if you get onto the nomination or you don't get on the nomination ballot, don't just give up the next year. It takes, it does take maneuvering and getting out there, and you have to politic to actually get on the ballot now, which is a good thing to get people out there. So when you get somebody to come and tap you on the shoulder, go out there and tap many people out there as you can to nominate you, and do it early, because people get the ballot and they like to turn it in because they don't end up thinking about it and forgetting about it. So there's usually a push right at the beginning, and then there's a big push at the end. And most people have already reached out to many people before even the ballot opens. So that's something you need to consider. And also, if you don't get elected, it took me several times to get elected in all my positions except president. And it just happened to be I hit the right time for the president to do that. But every single other position with that large or secretary treasurer, I basically had to be, I was beaten the first time I ran and then came back and won it the second time. So don't give up just because you didn't get elected one year. It just happens to be who's on the ballot, and it could be a difference of 3 or 4 votes. They're oftentimes close elections too. That's all I have.
Thank you, Kermit. I would also like to add that many times there are task forces and other committees that the president, the new incoming president, may want to refresh or start anew. And I have seen many times that people who had run for an office and lost an election ended up getting a different leadership experience because he or she had put his or her name forward, and it was an indicator to the leadership that this person wants to be involved in a new and different way. And then that person was able to, demonstrate commitment and get better known, and then was later, achieve the position that they had originally tried for. I've also seen cases where people did that and then moved into a different direction. And so if one of the outcomes of this presentation or of this outreach effort is that you learn about some opportunities, it may actually open a door to something else that you weren't initially considering. I did want to leave a little bit of time for Steve to let you know about what resources are available to you as a member. And then we do have a few questions that we need to get to that came up in the Q&A.
Thank you, Ellen. One moment. Let's get this going here. So, and you've heard a couple of these things I'm about to mention, but it's always good to reinforce some of these concepts. But the overarching goal for the leaders of any nonprofit organization should be to operate it in such a way to ensure its perpetuity. At the very highest level, the Executive Council is responsible for the ultimate direction and the management of the Society's affairs. And this includes things like approving the outcomes to be pursued for the year based on informed consideration of opportunities as well as various challenges, ensuring that all the resources, financial and other, that you need are going to be there to achieve the desired outcomes. And monitoring the progress and making adjustments to the strategies and policies in response to any changes that may occur. And a lot of changes will occur over the years. So when one volunteers for service on the Executive Council and they're elected, they owe a fiduciary responsibility to HFES. And some basic expectations related to service include attending the scheduled Executive Council meetings, being responsive to emails from the staff as well as from other members of Council, reviewing materials ahead of time and asking the staff questions ahead of time so that you feel prepared. And when Ellen's talking about resources, one resource that we implemented about 2 years ago is called a board portal. And it's a piece of software that we use to upload all the reports for the council to review. And in the old days, you would put together a large 200-page PDF and email it out. And by the time the council meeting rolled around, a lot of the materials were outdated. And so we have the ability now to upload documents whenever anything changes, and materials are constantly updated, something you can read on your iPad on the plane, and just be prepared. One really cool feature of the platform is the ability to go in and annotate it. So you can make notes like remind me to ask a question about X, or to bring up a point about this. So it's a really good tool that we've been using. Kermit mentioned the need to remain strategic and not tactical. The paid staff are the tacticians. And try to identify and encourage others to join the society, volunteer for a committee, or even serve on the executive council. Members of the leadership also should review the society's governing documents, the articles of incorporation, the bylaws, the policies, what we call the operating rules. Help keep activities focused on the mission of the society. Very importantly, respect confidentiality. Disclose any personal conflicts. Take care not to legally obligate the society, and support the decisions of council, even if you might have voted in another direction. Those in positions of responsibility and authority in the governance of HFES or any board of directors, again, owe a fiduciary responsibility to the society. And these include the duties of care, loyalty, and obedience. These are actual legal standards based on case law. In short, they mean that members of the Executive Council are required to act reasonably, prudently, and in the best interests of the organization to avoid negligence and fraud and to avoid any conflicts of interest. Briefly, the duty of care requires directors and officers to exercise ordinary and responsible care in the performance of their duties for the society. The duty of loyalty means that one can't put their own interests before the organization's interests when making any decisions affecting the society. And the duty of obedience requires members of the Executive Council to act in accordance with the Articles of Incorporation and the bylaws and with all applicable laws and regulations. Because of these very real legal obligations, there can be personal liability associated with serving on a board or on the Executive Council. But personal liability can be minimized by being completely prepared for the Executive Council meetings and before making any decisions, by actively taking part in deliberations and asking questions, recommending that we, as a board, as an Executive Council, seek outside expertise when it's warranted. An example might be reaching out to legal counsel, reviewing the monthly financial statements and the annual audit, again, avoiding conflicts of interest and disclosing any potential conflicts at the outset, and really just generally being up to speed on the activities of the society. As a society, HFES helps manage risk associated with service by carrying what's known as directors and officers liability insurance. And this protects a board member or an Executive Council member from liability if they were to, for instance, make an error which was not intentional. Additionally, some states offer volunteer immunity protection laws. But again, the easiest way to avoid risk is to be a good fiduciary and to live up to the duties of care, loyalty, and obedience. Let's give you a moment to read that. I thank you, and I turn it back to you, Ellen.
Super. One of the things I did want to mention is that the society does help the members of the EC for the additional, well, if we're having a face-to-face meeting, for the additional hotel nights for the EC meetings, but does not pay for us to go to the conference or cover our hotel nights for the conference, but for the additional, just for the EC extra hotel nights. I wanted to turn it over.
Actually, Ellen, 2 years ago, the EC is now, and editors are now paid for to go to registration, I believe, for the annual meeting.
Okay, I
That's
guess
right, Steve.
I've always declined it maybe, but
Yeah.
okay, no, that's good.
Just recently it's done that, but Just a couple of answers for, typically for the elections nomination process to get on the ballot, it's typically around 30 to 35 to guarantee yourself on the at-large and secretary treasurer. But that just depends on how many other people. I mean, if there's, it's a race to the top 6 vote nominators. The top 6 that get the most nominations are on the ballot. So typically it's around 30, but sometimes it's around 10. The last ones get in are around 10. It just depends year to year on how many that are really active on getting nominations with any of the positions, and some positions we've had down as little as 1 or 2. We've tried to eliminate the ones just because you have to self-nominate yourself and have at least one other person. In recent years, I think the ORs now have been adjusted to having a minimum of 3, I believe, 3 or 4. So you have to, yes, you have to, the nominations come from, the nomination ballots are sent out to members only, and not student members. So it's got to be full members in the society to nominate for anybody. And then the other one was about a question I saw was about the division chairs or domain leaders previously. That was developed back under Waldemar Kowalski presidency. They developed this new structure where you have 5 division chairs that each have their own sort of domain that are and committees that they're interacting with and leading over. That then report up to EC on the daily their activities throughout the year, as well as push ideas down and initiatives down to them. So that's what those division chairs are. And I'll let somebody else talk from that point on.
It's 1 o'clock, so I want to be respectful if people want to jump off. But Steve, can we run a couple minutes extra?
Absolutely.
Okay. So first I wanted to open it back up to the panelists to see, now that we've had this vibrant discussion, were there any other burning topics that you might like to bring up?
I just did want to mention that the call for nominations will be going out May 1st. And in that broadcast email communication, there will be answers to all the detailed questions one might have regarding eligibility and the process. But we welcome any questions anybody may have.
Perfect. And the panelists, feel free to jump off. I know we're running over a couple minutes.
Bye, everybody. It's been fun.
Thank you, Nancy.
So I wanted to open it up to Carolyn and Rich to see if you just had any other thoughts before we go.
Well, I've been kind of typing. That's like my preference anyway, to just sit back and type. So if anybody can see the answers to some of the Q&A with details, I think that could be very helpful. But one of the questions that Ken Catchpole asked was, where do you start? And I think that's a really important question. You've already heard that there are multiple volunteer opportunities. The ones that are closest to kind of the elected office positions are probably the division chair kind of roles that you've heard about. And the reason for that is because you're at the meetings, you're working with executive council. I think you are technically, or at least informally, part of executive council. If you're a division chair, you don't vote, but you're there. But it's a lot of responsibilities, so it's not something I would say should be one's first volunteer activity at HFES. The kind of easiest places to get in are technical groups, number one, because that's probably where most of your interface already is with the society. And there's also a lot of roles within technical groups. So you can start with a low demand role, like a newsletter editor, right, before you become the program chair or the chair. So there's opportunity for advancement. And I think, if you're in the technical group doing things related to your work. So I'm a member of like the healthcare technical group and the aging technical group. I feel like what I contribute to the TG or technical group is really aligned with my day-to-day work. But the other kind of low commitment activity is to serve on a committee for a year or more. You're not responsible for everything. You're working with others. Or to serve on a task force, although those are appointed by the president and then populated by the chair of the task force. So you might not be able to get on to one just at random. But if you're invited to one, I would definitely say yes, because it's 1 year. You're usually working on a focused topic. And at the end of that year, you're free to move on to another activity.
I'll just also mention, now in addition to technical groups, we have affinity groups. And so those also offer, leadership and opportunities for engaging with the society and, working on behalf of the society. So there's that too. The other thing I would just mention is, while we encourage people to encourage other people to run for office, don't nominate somebody without letting them know. That is not the approach to take. Have those conversations early and, have it be a mutual, made in mutual agreement that, yes, this person wants to run and they would really appreciate it if you would nominate them. Getting a surprise nomination, in some ways, it makes life more difficult for the nominating committee because then, they're trying to figure out if this person really wants to run and the person doesn't know and they have to decide. So that's kind of makes for some inefficiencies too. So, get that squared away ahead of time, with everybody's eyes open on that.
Yeah, and just to be respectful of people's time, but I do want to mention we do have the HFES org chart up on the society's page. If you haven't looked at it before, it'll be an eye-opener because you'll see all the different divisions, you'll see who's on executive council, you'll see who's running the committees, and you might see something that you really didn't know that we were doing because the initiatives do get started and then get sunsetted. And so we really are an organic group. We move in the directions that we think are strategic and tactical for the society. And there might be something that you're really very interested in and that you didn't realize we were involved in. Steve, I'll leave it to you to close, to let people know like where the link will be or how follow-up information. Will everything be in that email that goes out in May, or will we be doing something sooner so that people can get prepared?
The goal is to have a broadcast email going out with regards to all one might need to know about the nominations and election process by May 1, but if we can get that out earlier, we surely will. In addition to the broadcast email, we will also have supplemental information available on the website. And very importantly, people should never hesitate to call or email me or anybody else in the office for any questions. And one last point I would like to make, another resource on the website under the About HFES tab at the very bottom of the drop-down menu is a button that says Committees. If you click on that, you'll be asked to log in, but that takes you to the database where we have every single committee listed. You can read a charge of what each committee does. And then lastly, you can click on a button and see a roster who's currently involved. And so people should feel welcome to reach out to chairs of committees and indicate interest to serve.
Well, thank you. I want to thank Steve and all the panelists, including Caroline, who was happily able to give us her early video, and to all the people who were willing to take time out of their busy schedule to ask questions so that those who couldn't attend could also benefit and hear that information. And we look forward to people's continued involvement in the society.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, Steve.